So how much do you get into, have you looked into any of the sort of Project Bluebeam, War of the Worlds style events?
Well, I'm open to it. I've looked into it. The War of the Worlds, is that what it was called? War of the Worlds?
Yeah.
That famous
Hmm.
broadcast was definitely a psyop. There's no doubt about it.
Well, because it's, and it's based on, it's
Hmm.
based on the book by H.G. Wells, who
Right.
is, connected to the elites and the, eugenics obsessed elites. And we all know him and love him for, The Time Machine and War of the Worlds, but he also wrote nonfiction books called The Open Conspiracy and The New World Order, and said, tons of people, will die trying to fight the New World Order, but, they'll never win.
Yeah, so there's that connection, and I just think it's eerily similar to the experiment, perhaps, that they might play on us on the 9th. So we'll
That's
see.
and that's the thing. So the anniversary of the War of the Worlds broadcast, the 73rd anniversary, was Sunday night. Orson Welles did it on
Ah,
October 30th, 1938. So one, he did it the day before Halloween, so because perhaps if it were on Halloween, it would have been so kind of obvious,
yeah.
a stunt or a show. And that actually reminds me, the BBC had a piece this past week, and it concerns some author's new book. Of course, there's never any, like, just a news story where, someone investigated. It's like, because it's a new book and this guy's shilling it. But it's all about the sort of over-reported stories in America and kind of overblown. And and I have not gone through it at this point, but it makes the case that the War of the Worlds event has become more legendary and
I thought it
overblown.
was the contrary. From what I understand, and I don't know too much about it, I was always interested in this growing up with my love for radio. It's one of those things that radio nerds like yourself and myself looked at and kind of were like, cool, it's one of those bits of history that's fascinating. But I thought that I had heard something that they didn't really tell us the full extent of the reaction, that people really did freak out, and that because of them gauging this reaction, they've made some changes in how they're going to handle disclosure or other false flags, if you will.
And this, has been called, the panic, it's the panic broadcast. And there are those stories of, and I don't think any of the suicides or any of that actually, bared out for reality. But even if it wasn't people running down the street screaming, pulling their hairs out, saying, the aliens are here, it's the psychological effect. So there is a book, and the title escapes me, but it concerns basically I think the Princeton and their connections to, was this actually a planned event by the elites? And not just hey, wow, this crazy kid Orson Welles did this thing that was really effective, let's look at it. That they sort of planned it and
Hmm.
perhaps planted the idea with Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater and
Well,
all of that.
I don't know that that part of it is really that important. Because at the end of the day, like you said, they can take these genuine events and learn from them regardless
That's,
of
yeah, the
whether.
saying is, the real action is in the reaction.
So,
So this piece that Shepard wrote on the brink of Bluebeam concerns also the geoengineering. And I've posted a lot of things in the past on Media Monarchy about this that pretty much kind of, lays it all out and says all of the experimentation and all of the technology and all of the pieces are there for them to pull off a
yeah.
staged event, alien event, Jesus comes back event, whichever, maybe the most, politically or culturally expedient or necessary at the moment. But seeding the skies with, the
Barium.
barium and the strontium and all
Yeah,
of
think
that.
about it like this. Their sky is a canvas,
Exactly.
and it needs a screen to project
Exactly.
these images on, perhaps. And what better screen than these nano-sized particles of barium and strontium that spread out and create the perfect picture for you. Why would they be spraying it on a regular basis, though, is the question that comes to mind.
That's,
If this is
and then
their only
that's,
purpose.
and that sends us, into, or at least, here and now, right, with speculation that, well, maybe it's for multiple purposes. Maybe they are setting it because it does create the screen in the sky, basically, the gigantic plasma screen, so that they can project Jesus or the Mahdi or aliens or whatever up on the sky for everybody to see, essentially. Or does it, and one of the other reasons, are they also doing it for, for global warming? They say, we're geoengineering the atmosphere. Mm-hmm. But when you tie in, so you've got the technology to make the canvas and the screen in the sky. You've got the technology to beam the sound into your head with the audio spotlights, which they've done with billboards in Times Square. And there was this story about connecting to basically, people being tortured and waterboarded in the War of Terror. But a story came out, and I think it was from ABC News. And again, I apologize to everybody for mentioning a lot of things that say, I can't remember exactly. But I think, like so many things, people have to go research it for themselves. I'll supply as much sources and citing as I can, but I can't be that, comprehensive. But there was a story about basically a CIA torturer who said, yeah, it was funny. The next morning, the guy came back and said, somebody they had been working over came back the next morning and basically said, my God appeared to me and said I should, tell you everything, with the speculation of maybe they sort of, blue beamed this guy, and he thought his God appeared to him and told him, submit to the torture and go along with it.
That's that term, blue beam. This guy, it's like right out of a science fiction movie. Maybe the blue beam got him. It's
with
crazy.
the anniversary of the War of the Worlds broadcast, which we just had on October 30th, I posted to Media Monarchy an amazing sort of remix that a listener sent to me. And I need to update my notes on MediaMonarchy.com. I don't actually, and I think some folks do, I don't want people to think I made this myself. A listener, a guy named Marcus, sent this to me, and it's all posted up. But basically, he took the original, hour-long War of the Worlds broadcast and added tons of music and sound effects and Pink Floyd and The Orb and, CBS News reports. And he basically kind of remixed it and mashed it up. And again, very, very timely.
I'm actually silent here because I'm looking it up. I'm going to MediaMonarchy.com, and let's see here. Where is it?
So it's the War of the Worlds, the Remix Project on the 73rd anniversary of the broadcast. Project.
Here it is. Let's see if I can listen to a quick excerpt here. The 73rd anniversary of the War of the Worlds. Orson Welles. Here he is. Orson, take it away. James, you're supposed to be Orson.
Oh. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Cool, dude. I like it. I'm gonna have to check that out after the show.
So I'm a huge Orson Welles fan. Pretty much all his films, all his radio, he was one of those guys
a Freemason.
that
you know that, right?
Everything he did had amazing art to it. Wasn't he a Freemason?
I don't know.
You never
of those things that
and you never really want to find out that the artists that you do really admire. You're like, oh crap, he was one of those. Right? But I think a lot of them, we can tie in Stanley Kubrick, especially if we're talking about kind of fake space events, because there's all the speculation about him, faking the moon landing for NASA, and even if that's bunk, he did actually shoot material for NASA in case the Apollo missions failed. And Stanley Kubrick always seems like someone who, in all of his films, he sort of seems like he had seen the inside and he was actually trying to kind of warn us about it or tell us about it in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, a lot of people feel that way about Stanley Kubrick's work. It's interesting. I don't know too much about his films, to be honest. I'm kind of, I don't know. I'm kind of behind the curve with films. I spend so much of my time researching, I kind of lost all the pop culture film stuff. And that's why I like having you on, because you know about how they put this right in front of our face.
And that's always kind of been my first love, if you will, has always kind of been media. Yeah. So the funny story is I had kind of a conservative Christian upbringing. I wasn't really allowed to buy music or go to movies. But once that wall kind of crumbled in 1988 when I was 11 years old, once I was allowed to go to the movies and buy music, it was off to the races and down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's how I felt when I found talk radio. My parents took away my TV when I was younger. Okay, I grew up in the generation where we had TVs. The kids actually had their own TV, which
Uh-huh.
is so ridiculous. Don't get me started on that.
I had one.
Yeah. So, anyways, they took away my TV, and I found talk radio. Because it's stimulated me, and I loved the call-in interaction, and I found Coast to
Mm-hmm.
Coast very young, at like 10 years old,
Mm.
and I would listen to these people call in. The other night, James, we had this caller call in, and he's a pretty cool caller. I've heard him call up before the show. You get to know some of these callers.
Uh-huh.
It's just. Anyways, he calls in and he says, "Hey Bob, right now I'm in New York and I'm looking up in the skies, and it's totally red, totally red. I don't know what the heck's happening. I wish you could see this right now." And I said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. Put your friend on the phone. What are you smoking?" So he puts his friend on the phone. He says, "Yeah, Bob, I'm telling you, the sky's red. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen." So I said, "All right." I keep an open mind. Less than an hour later, I talked to my good friends at the Intel Hub, and they had shown that there was these auroras that could be seen
Okay.
in half of the states. And I know you covered this as well on your website, Cyberspace War.
And that was something, thankfully, as I kind of referred to earlier, I've got my man Alan in Omaha, who's my main, writer and editor over on cyberspaceboard.com. October 24th, aurora is seen in half of states, and he does link right back to you guys at theintelhub.com. These rare all-red auroras sometimes appear during intense geomagnetic storms. And that's, again, kind of what we're seeing all around.
It's pretty crazy to experience this. I mean, if you would have asked me if people would be able to see auroras in the South, in Arkansas, or wherever they were, I'd say you're crazy. That's something for the North Pole. But I don't know that I understand it, to be honest, James. These Earth changes and this kind of thing is a little bit over my head, to be honest.
Oh,
But I
I'm not
gotta
a
keep open
scientist
mind and learn
either.
about it.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, you got to keep an open mind pretty much about everything. But yeah, I'm not a scientist myself, but again, I think we just try and take in a lot of the kind of raw data and information, and hopefully parse it and use our brains to break it down. And like we've kind of talked about from peacerevolution.org, it's like using those lost tools of education. Use your grammar, logic, and rhetoric. For me, it seems like it could be a number of things, but just as the old witch doctors way back, they knew how the skies worked, so they could say, hey, if you guys don't play ball, I'm gonna make the moon go away, or I won't let the moon come back.
Yeah,
So
that was
they're
one of
able
the
to kind of
early control
exploit,
mechanisms.
exactly. So they can exploit. So if they were able to do it thousands of years ago, think about on the multiple levels, that it can be pulled off now. And when you tie in all the Occupy stuff and the general strikes, and you tie in the massive, winter storms that have already, beat up the East Coast before Halloween, which is rare. And then you see those weird earthquakes they had on the East Coast, a couple of months ago, and the hurricanes and all of those things. It seems like the East Coast has been getting it more than the West Coast. But on all, I don't know, it just seems like on so many multiple levels, everything just kind of keeps escalating, and we're kind of teetering.
Definitely some interesting times to be alive in.
It is, and like I said, I had a conservative Christian upbringing, so that that background and those connections, and even those folks, still say it's like, well, it's all in the Lord's hands.
Revelations.
Yeah. And that's, I think, for me, one of the, disappointing things that you don't see, churches coming out more against all these things that go on in the world. You'll see them tacitly go along with all of it with Bush because he supposedly is aligned with their conservative yada yada. But then when Obama comes in, oh, God, we've got to take our country back, and he's going to ruin this country, and it's the crappy, it's the ridiculous partisan politics that with the short attention span, people can't remember that the previous puppet from 4 years ago is no different than the current puppet, and that they just carry on the agenda and pass off the nuclear football, literally, in the suitcase. So it's all those kind of things, that you find really frustrating, that, everybody in all their little boxes. But it's hard, how do you argue against, well, it's all in the Lord's hands? Like, oh, okay.
Jeez.